Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 9, the Hiramic Legend, From the Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 8, The Hiramic Legend. The account of the building of King Solomon's temple is taken from the Bible, and Masonic ritual agrees, but for one outstanding exception. The Bible infers Hiram was alive after the completion of the temple, and there is no mention in the Bible of the tragedy, which is the basis of the third degree. No such claim is made in the ritual, for it uses the usual phrasing when departing from scriptural authority. Masonic tradition informs us. Waite, commenting on the disagreement between the biblical and Masonic accounts, states, "The legend of the master builder is the great allegory of masonry. It happens that this figurative story is grounded on the fact of a personality mentioned in Holy Scripture, but the historical background is of the accidents and not the essence. The significance is in the allegory and not in any point of history which may lie behind it." Masonic students have been unable to establish the exact date of the introduction of the Hiramic legend into the ritual of Masonry. In November 1886, Brother Hayter Lewis delivered a paper on the subject before Quatuor Coronati Lodge of London. He stated that his attention had been called to a 14th century manuscript written in Arabic with Hebrew characters in which the word mak was the subject of the manuscript. Each letter was the beginning of a key word making a sentence which would read, Metsuanu, Adonanu, Chirum, we have found our master Hiram. The constitutions of 1723 make no mention of the death of Hiram, and at that time only 2 degrees were known, or at least recognized by the governing Masonic body. The third degree was gradually introduced after 1723 from England to Scotland, and was not in common use until 1770. From his research, Brother Lewis concludes that the Hiramic legend was introduced into English Masonry after the establishment of the Grand Lodge of England, and the third degree was not generally used until several years after that event. From the idea and nomenclature of the Hiramic legend, it is generally attributed to Phoenician sources, but of its introduction into Masonry, we are in complete ignorance. Some are of the opinion that the Great Schism was caused by this very innovation, and that the ancients resented the tampering with the ritual and ancient landmarks by the moderns. A study of the allegory indicates there is more to it than meets the eye. It contains far more below the surface than is apparent on the surface in the moral lesson. If the latter is all that is to be gained from the allegory, it was wholly unnecessary to invent a fictitious story about a biblical character which contradicts the Bible. The authors could easily have turned to profane history and found numerous characters who have been dramatically faithful to trusts imposed on them. An outstanding example may be found in the Demolay degrees, built upon the story of the martyred Jacques Demolay. As a Masonic writer, I have at all times been conscious of my obligations, and even when I felt that a quotation from ritual would not be a violation, I have deferred to what might be the opinion of others and have refrained. In connection with the Hiramic legend, it might be construed by some that I was quoting portions of the secret ritual were I to narrate it in my own words, and doubtless such would be the case. For while I have read numerous printed versions, ritual once memorized is difficult to disregard. For that reason, I have turned to Manly P. Hall, and with his express permission, quote from Masonic, Hermetic, Qabbalistic, and Rosicrucian philosophy. This is one of the most concise and factually correct recitals of the legend I have ever seen, written by a non-member of the fraternity. Mr. Hall is obviously beyond the criticism of divulging secrets. The Hiramic legend, Hiram, as master of the builders, divided his workmen into 3 groups which were termed entered apprentices, fellow craftsmen, and master masons. To each division he gave certain passwords and signs by which their respective excellence could be quickly determined. While all were classified according to their merits, some were dissatisfied, for they desired a more exalted position than they were capable of filling. At last, 3 fellow craftsmen, more daring than their companions, determined to force Hiram to reveal to them the password of the master's degree. Knowing that Hiram always went into the unfinished sanctum sanctorum at high noon to pray, these ruffians, whose names were Jubela, Jubelo, and Jubilum, lay in wait for him, one at each of the main gates of the temple. Hiram, about to leave the temple by the south gate, was suddenly confronted by Jubala, armed with a 24-inch gauge. Upon Hiram's refusal to reveal the master's word, the ruffian struck him on the throat with the rule, and the wounded master then hastened to the west gate, where Jubalo, armed with a square, awaited him and made a similar demand. Again Hiram was silent, and the second assassin struck him on the breast with the square. Hiram thereupon staggered to the east gate, only to be met there by Jubalam armed with a maul. When Hiram refused him the master's word, Jubalam struck the master between the eyes with the mallet, and Hiram fell dead. The body of Hiram was buried by the murderers over the brow of Mount Moriah, and a sprig of acacia placed upon the grave. The murderers then sought to escape punishment for their crime by embarking for Ethiopia, but the port was closed. All three were finally captured, and after admitting their guilt, were duly executed. Parties of three were then sent out by King Solomon, and one of these groups discovered the newly made grave marked by the evergreen sprig. After the entered apprentices and the fellow craftsmen had failed to resurrect their master from the dead, he was finally raised by the master mason with the strong grip of a lion's paw. To the initiated builder, the name Hiram Abiff signifies my father, the universal spirit, one in essence, three in aspect. Thus the murdered master is a type of the cosmic martyr, the crucified spirit of good, the dying God whose mystery is celebrated throughout the world. Among the manuscripts of Dr. Sigismund Backstrom, the initiated Rosicrucian, appears the following extracts from von Welling concerning the true philosophic nature of the Masonic Hiram. The original word seen here, Hiram, is a radical world consisting of three consonants seen here and here. Cheth, Resh, and Mem, one. Cheth signifies Chama, the sun's light that is the universal, invisible, cold fire of nature attracted by the sun, manifested into light and sent down to us and to every planetary body belonging to the solar system. 2. Resh signifies thus Ruach, that is spirit, air, wind, as being the vehicle which conveys and collects the light into numberless phoci, wherein the solar rays of light are agitated by a circular motion and manifested in heat and burning fire. 3. Thus, Mem signifies Majim, water, humidity, but rather the mother of water, that is radical humidity, or a particular kind of condensed air. These three constitute the universal agent or fire of nature in one word, seen here, Hiram, not Hiram. Albert Pike mentions several forms of the name Hiram, Kerm, Kerm, and Kurom, the latter ending in the sacred Hindu monosyllable Om, which may also be extracted from the names of the three murderers. Pike further relates the three ruffians to a triad of stars in the constellation of Libra, and also calls attention to the fact that the Chaldean god Bel, metamorphosed into a demon by the Jews, appears in the name of each of the murderers, Jubela, Jubalo, and Jubilum. To interpret the Hiramic legend requires familiarity with both the Pythagorean and Qabbalistic systems of numbers and letters, and also the philosophic and astronomic cycles of the Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Brahmins. For example, consider the number 33. The first Temple of Solomon stood for 33 years in its pristine splendor. At the end of that time, it was pillaged by the Egyptian king Shishak, and finally, 588 BC, it was completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the people of Jerusalem were led into captivity to Babylon. See General History of Freemasonry by Robert McCoy. Also, King David ruled for 33 years in Jerusalem. The Masonic order is divided into 33 symbolic degrees. There are 33 segments in the human spinal column, and Jesus was crucified in the 33rd year of his life. The efforts made to discover the origin of the Hiramic legend show that while the legend in its present form is comparatively modern, its underlying principles run back to remotest antiquity. It is generally admitted by modern Masonic scholars that the story of the martyred Hiram is based upon the Egyptian rites of Osiris, whose death and resurrection figuratively portrayed the spiritual death of man and his regeneration through initiation into the mysteries. Hiram is also identified with Hermes through the inscription on the emerald table. From these associations, it is evident that Hiram is to be considered as a prototype of humanity. In fact, he is Plato's idea, archetype of man. As Adam after the fall symbolizes the idea of human degeneration, so Hiram through his resurrection symbolizes the idea of human regeneration. The Lion's Paw, from Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.